To be honest, I'm going to get plenty of criticism over my lifetime, and it's something that I don't completely ignore.
A flash drive arrived at Kensington Palace this morning, quietly, but with an unmistakable sense of purpose. It was left in a plain envelope on William's private desk, no return address, nothing to hint at who had delivered it. Inside, the files revealed a meticulously documented strategy, detailed down to the smallest step, and it would soon make clear just how serious the situation was. Meghan had allegedly been executing this strategy for 18 months, targeting William's children directly. His response, delivered within just 3 hours of discovering the drive, had already set events in motion that would reshape the Sussex situation entirely. This was the flash drive that exposed everything. William found the envelope when he arrived at his office at 7:53 a.m., earlier than usual, though typical for a man whose responsibilities rarely allowed for leisurely mornings, who was always alert to every detail in his world. The envelope itself was cream-coloured, made of expensive paper stock, and bore only his name in bold block capitals across the front. His private secretary had no idea who had left it, and security footage from the corridor showed nothing unusual. Someone with inside access had deliberately positioned it where William could not overlook it, leaving a silent, urgent message in its placement. He opened it cautiously, instincts sharpened from a lifetime in security-conscious environments. Inside was a single black unmarked flash drive, accompanied by a handwritten note on matching cream paper. One sentence, cold and precise. "You need to know what she's been planning for your children." No signature, no further explanation. Just that chilling statement that carried an unmistakable weight. William's first call went immediately to Palace security. The flash drive needed to be scanned for malware and checked for any digital threats before it could be opened on any Palace system. 40 tense minutes later, the scan cleared. No viruses, no malicious code, nothing that could compromise Palace operations. What remained was simply a collection of files, meticulously organised into folders labelled by dates and subject headings. The primary folder was titled Media Strategy, George, 18+. Inside, dozens of documents detailed strategies that were deliberate, precise, and alarming. One email from 7 months ago stood out, in which Meghan allegedly wrote to a senior editor at a major American publication. "When George is old enough to have his own voice, he'll need people he can trust to tell his story, without Palace filters. Building that relationship now, even at a distance, ensures he knows I'm an option when he's ready to speak his truth." William read that email 3 times, each reading making the implications clearer and more disturbing. Meghan wasn't simply planning interviews about the royal family. She was scheming to cultivate direct relationships with his children, positioning herself as an alternative confidant, someone who could offer media platforms when they were old enough to question Palace rules and potentially rebel. The second folder, labelled Charlotte Outreach, 12 to 16, revealed a separate but equally calculated plan. The third focused on Louis, less developed due to his age but showing the same strategic pattern. Across all 3 folders, the pattern was unmistakable. Meghan wasn't casually speculating about William's children. She was executing a long-term plan to become a trusted authority figure in their lives, someone they might turn to as they grew older, especially if tensions arose within Palace life, as had happened with Harry. The most alarming folder, simply Implementation Timeline, made it clear that this wasn't theoretical. Steps were already being taken. Meghan had allegedly been working with a California-based PR firm, specializing in relationship management and strategic positioning for high-value individuals. Expenses showed monitoring services, tracking public appearances, and even extracting information from social media accounts of the children's schoolmates' parents. Reading through the documents, William felt physically ill. This wasn't another wave of Sussex media complaints. This wasn't typical drama. This was far more invasive and calculated. Meghan was treating his children as targets, gathering intelligence, planning future approaches, and preparing to insert herself at moments when they might be most vulnerable to outside influence. William leaned back from his desk, hands shaking with suppressed rage. He rarely let himself dwell on the years of Sussex attacks on the monarchy, on media stories painting him as cold or controlling, or on watching his brother become estranged. But this planning, targeting his children, collecting intelligence to exploit vulnerabilities, crossed a line into an entirely new, dangerous territory. He grabbed his phone and made 3 rapid calls. First to Catherine, then to his private secretary, and finally to Princess Anne, asking her to make herself available within the hour. While waiting for them, he went through the flash drive again, taking notes, documenting the most damning evidence, preparing decisions he knew would be irrevocable. By 9:45 a.m., Catherine arrived, worried. 15 minutes later, Anne entered with her typical brisk efficiency. William had made his decision and was prepared to show exactly how a future king responds when someone threatens those he's sworn to protect. The strategic targeting of George, Charlotte, and Louis became even clearer as the 3 of them reviewed the flash drive. The materials revealed Meghan's planning had involved child psychologists, media consultants, and experts in what the files called high-value relationship cultivation with restricted access subjects. The language was clinical, almost corporate, treating William's children as targets in a carefully structured operation. The George files were the most extensive, reflecting his position as future king and highest value target. Plans outlined responses if George struggled with expectations, showing how Meghan could position herself through intermediaries as someone who understood royal pressures and could offer perspectives his parents couldn't. If George pursued interests outside palace approval, strategies were in place for Meghan to publicly support him, building gratitude and emotional bonds. Any personal crisis, relationship challenge, or public misstep came with a prepared approach to reach out in ways that could generate future influence. Charlotte's materials followed a different strategy, focusing on her family-oriented personality and potential feelings of being overshadowed by her older brother. The files suggested Meghan could present herself as a mentor, offering guidance based on her own experiences. Opportunities were planned for connection through charitable work or advocacy on issues Charlotte cared about, always framed to appear supportive rather than manipulative. The explicit goal: ensure Charlotte sees Meghan as an ally and confidant. Louis's files were less developed, acknowledging his young age, but maintained the same strategic approach. Notes suggested he could become an easier access point if the approaches to George and Charlotte were resisted. Perhaps most sinister was the surveillance infrastructure. The flash drive contained evidence of a network of paid informants providing regular updates on the Wales children. Former palace staff and parents at Lambrook School reportedly provided detailed accounts of the children's activities, behaviours, and casual comments from William or Catherine. One source, identified only as Source 7, received nearly £40,000 over 18 months for monthly reports. Even without personal social media accounts, George, Charlotte, and Louis were tracked indirectly through schoolmates and family friends, with sophisticated tools extracting information not visible through official palace communications. Additionally, files documented Meghan's alleged tracking of William and Catherine's parenting decisions, school choices, independence allowances, and media exposure to identify potential pressure points for future influence. Even after all the layers of planning, strategy, and surveillance, the final thought remained undeniable. All of it was being documented and analysed for potential leverage, focusing relentlessly on the children. One memo went even further, suggesting that if William and Catherine maintained strict control over their children's public presence into their teenage years, it could allegedly create the exact kind of frustration Meghan might later exploit. The document claimed that controlled silence could be reframed as suppression, opening space for alternative paths to public expression. What unsettled Catherine most, however, was a folder containing psychological profiles of each child, written by someone presenting themselves as an expert in child development and family dynamics. These profiles went far beyond harmless personality observations. They outlined perceived vulnerabilities, insecurities, emotional triggers, and so-called pressure points that could be used to build rapport or encourage reliance on outside authority figures. Catherine stared at the screen in disbelief. This didn't read like concern or guidance. It read like an intelligence agency's targeting analysis, not family relationship planning, and that realization sent a cold wave through the room. As the three of them sat in William's office, the flash drive's contents spread across multiple screens. The true magnitude of what they were facing became impossible to ignore. This was not a situation that could be handled with quiet diplomacy or private family discussions behind closed doors. The question hanging in the air wasn't whether to act, but how far they were willing to go. William looked at the profiles of his children, written as if they were strategic subjects, at the outlined methods for exploiting future vulnerabilities, and at evidence of 18 months of surveillance he had never detected. In that moment, he knew his response would have to be just as calculated, just as comprehensive, and completely unforgiving. Anything less would be a failure to protect them. What William didn't yet know, as he absorbed the flash drive's devastating contents, was that Catherine had already been quietly piecing something together weeks earlier. For nearly 6 weeks, she had been noticing patterns that didn't sit right. It began in late October, when Charlotte came home from school and casually mentioned that a classmate's mother had asked unusually detailed questions about the Wales family's Christmas plans. Charlotte said the questions felt strange, overly specific, focused on where they would be, how long they would stay, and exactly who would be present. On their own, they sounded innocent enough. But then George mentioned a similar interaction at a school sports event. Another parent had asked about William's travel schedule and whether the family struggled when he was away on official duties. Again, polite on the surface, but oddly probing. Individually, each moment could be brushed aside. Together, happening twice within a single week, they made Catherine's instincts spark. The third incident escalated things further. Catherine's personal protection officer flagged an individual who had appeared near Adelaide Cottage on 3 separate occasions over 2 weeks. Each time, there was a reasonable excuse: walking a dog, jogging, but the repetition felt deliberate rather than coincidental. A discreet background check revealed the individual was a private investigator, specializing in what their website described as discreet information services. That discovery transformed Catherine's unease into a full-blown alarm. Still, she didn't tell William immediately. Suspicions alone weren't enough, and she needed facts, not theories. Instead, Catherine contacted someone she trusted, a former MI5 officer now running a private security consulting firm for high-net-worth individuals requiring discreet investigative services. Her instructions were clear and focused: determine whether anyone was actively gathering information about her children, identify who was behind it, and document everything with evidence strong enough to support action if necessary. The investigation took 3 weeks and uncovered far more than Catherine expected. Using contacts in private security and law enforcement circles, the investigator identified at least 5 individuals collecting information on the Wales family with a clear focus on the children. Surveillance was happening. That much was undeniable. What the investigator couldn't access, however, was the full scope of Meghan's planning. They could trace the activity back to Meghan's team and prove intelligence gathering was underway, but they couldn't document the strategic intent or long-term objectives beyond that. The evidence confirmed Catherine's worst fears, but it still didn't show the full picture. What Catherine hadn't yet shared with William and was still processing herself was a conversation from 2 days earlier. The investigator had uncovered communications suggesting Meghan's team was attempting to recruit someone currently employed within the Wales household, offering substantial payment for ongoing access and information. That revelation shook Catherine to her core. Even more disturbing, some of the information being gathered went beyond public sightings or casual observations. Reports included details about the children's private routines, emotional challenges, sibling dynamics, and matters that should have been known only to immediate family or the closest staff. Somehow, those details had made their way into reports sent to California. Catherine also learned she had been monitored as well, though secondary to the focus on the children. Her parenting decisions, daily schedule, and private conversations at school events or charitable functions were documented and analysed. Anything that hinted at family dynamics or potential vulnerability points was noted and categorised. The decision to commission the investigation without telling William weighed heavily on her. Their marriage was built on trust and partnership, and keeping something this serious from him felt like a fracture in that foundation. But she justified it as protecting him from unnecessary worry until she had proof, not just intuition. Now, watching William absorb the flash drive's contents, seeing anger and betrayal flicker across his face, Catherine felt the full weight of having sensed something was wrong weeks earlier. She could have told him sooner. She could have shared her concerns even without all the evidence. When William finally asked her directly whether she had known anything about this before that day, Catherine chose honesty. She told him everything. His reaction was layered: anger that she had kept it from him, understanding of why she did, and recognition that she had been building a case strong enough to justify decisive action. But the revelation that Catherine had been tracking this for weeks also made one thing clear: there was no time left to hesitate. William's 3-hour war room began immediately. At 10:30 a.m., an emergency meeting convened in a secure conference room at Kensington Palace, routinely swept for surveillance devices and reserved for discussions requiring absolute confidentiality. William sat at the head of the table, the flash drive's most damning documents projected onto screens around the room. Catherine sat beside him. Across from them were William's private secretary, the head of palace security, senior legal counsel for the Wales family, and 2 representatives from the royal household's intelligence liaison office, responsible for maintaining ties with MI5 and related services. William opened the meeting without diplomatic padding. Meghan Markle has been running an 18-month intelligence operation targeting my children, he said flatly. This is not family drama. It's not media strategy. In the next 3 hours, your job is to help me shut this down completely and make sure it can never restart. The head of security reviewed the evidence with professional calm. Legal counsel raised the unavoidable question: what were the legal grounds for action? Information gathering on public figures exists in grey areas, especially when US law applies. William was ready. He pointed to evidence of attempted recruitment of household staff, potentially qualifying as bribery or corruption. Payments for information obtained through misrepresentation could be fraud. Unauthorized surveillance near royal residences raised security concerns. And most importantly, strategic planning to contact his children at specific ages could be argued as interference with parental rights. I want every legal angle identified and used, William said firmly. Princess Anne cut in sharply, as only she could. The legal questions mattered, but the strategic objective mattered more. Was this about defence only, or about ending the Sussex threat permanently? William paused, then answered clearly. The immediate goal was protecting his children and stopping surveillance. The broader goal was making it unmistakably clear that targeting his family carried consequences. Severe ones. Consequences that would make it unthinkable to ever try again, and that would force Harry to confront exactly what his loyalty truly meant. Catherine raised a practical concern immediately, cutting through the tension in the room with calm authority. What about the children? They needed to know something serious was happening, but without being scared or made to feel like they were in danger. Her focus was sharp, protective, and deeply maternal. The private secretary responded next, shifting the conversation into formal territory. He outlined the administrative and constitutional stakes, stressing that His Majesty would need to be informed before any action could move forward. No delays allowed. The Prime Minister would also need to be notified, especially if cooperation from law enforcement or intelligence services became necessary. There was also the wider picture to consider, including how this could impact the broader Sussex situation, particularly any ongoing discussions surrounding Harry's status or even whispers of reconciliation. William's response came instantly, sharp and unyielding. There was no hesitation in his voice at all. My father will be informed this afternoon, the Prime Minister this evening. As for reconciliation with Harry, that door just closed permanently. His tone was final. He made it clear he would not maintain a family relationship with someone married to a woman who treated his children like intelligence targets. No excuses, no soft landings. The next 2 hours were consumed by the creation of a detailed action plan, with multiple tracks running at the same time, fast and aggressive. The legal team moved first, preparing a series of filings designed to hit hard and leave no room to maneuver. Cease and desist letters were drafted for Meghan and her California PR firm, demanding the immediate termination of all information-gathering activities. Restraining orders were prepared to block any contact with William's children through any channel whatsoever. A civil complaint followed, seeking damages for invasion of privacy. attempted corruption of household staff, and emotional distress. The message was crystal clear. At the same time, the security team launched a full counterintelligence operation. Every individual named in the flash drive as a source would be interviewed by police or palace security. Those still employed within the household would be terminated immediately. No second chances. The intelligence liaison coordinated directly with MI5 to determine whether national security concerns were involved. Meanwhile, Catherine took responsibility for the family side, speaking to George, Charlotte, and Louis in age-appropriate ways. She made sure they understood to report any unusual contact or strange questions from adults outside their normal circles. Catherine also volunteered to inform the king personally, offering to shield William from what would undoubtedly be an emotionally heavy conversation. "Your father will struggle with this," she said plainly. "He'll want to believe there's some misunderstanding." She explained she could deliver the facts without emotions or old family ties clouding judgment. William accepted her offer with visible relief, recognizing that Anne's blunt, no-nonsense approach might be exactly what Charles needed to grasp the seriousness of the situation. The final piece of the plan focused on Harry. William would send a formal letter, delivered strictly through legal channels to ensure documentation and avoid any emotional confrontation. The letter would inform Harry of what had been uncovered, provide evidence of Meghan's operations, and present him with a clear, unavoidable choice. No dodging, no spinning. Just facts. By 1:45, the War Room had finalised a comprehensive strategy set to launch within hours. Legal filings would be submitted by the end of business in California, where the time difference meant courts were still open. Security interviews in the UK would begin immediately. Formal notification to Meghan would be delivered by 5 p.m. London time, landing right in her California morning and leaving her almost no time to organise a response. The legal assault began without hesitation. By 3:30 that afternoon, William's legal team had completed documents that would dramatically alter the Sussex situation and place Meghan in serious legal jeopardy she never saw coming. The strategy was multi-pronged, designed to strike from several directions at once, creating pressure that forced immediate shutdown while establishing precedent to prevent future targeting. The first filing hit the California Superior Court at 8:40 a.m. Pacific Time. It was a civil complaint alleging invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy. What made it especially lethal was its public nature. In California, civil complaints become public record. Within hours, journalists and members of the public could access it with a simple court search. William's legal team knew exactly what they were doing. They drafted the complaint with the expectation it would go public, ensuring every allegation was airtight legally and devastating reputationally. The second filing, submitted to the UK High Court at 3:45 p.m. London time, sought a sweeping injunction preventing Meghan, her agents, or anyone acting for her from gathering information about William's children in any form. It also prohibited direct contact or use of any previously collected information for any purpose, including media projects. The UK filing included data protection applications, demanding all improperly gathered information about the children be surrendered and destroyed. Both filings were supported by extensive flash drive evidence authenticated by forensic digital analysts, confirming integrity and legitimacy without question. The third legal strike was even more aggressive. William's lawyers filed a formal complaint with the California State Bar against the attorneys advising Meghan's operation. Cease and desist letters were sent to 17 individuals and entities named in the documents. Delivered by courier and email, they demanded immediate cessation of activities, destruction of gathered information, and written confirmation within 72 hours. Each letter warned that failure to comply would trigger individual legal action. The California PR firm faced special scrutiny. Alongside being named in the civil complaint, they received a 30-page cease and desist letter detailing their documented work. Their reaction said everything. Within 2 hours, their lawyer requested an emergency call. On that call, the firm claimed they only provided general PR services and denied knowledge of targeting William's children. William's team, ready for this play, offered a structured deal. The firm would hand over all documentation, terminate their contract immediately, and return any advance payments. In exchange, cooperation would be noted. That deal delivered something critical, a motivated witness with documents. As London evening set in and California morning unfolded, the legal machine was already producing results. Filings processed, letters received, panic spreading. Somewhere in Montecito, Meghan was about to learn a hard lesson about the British monarchy. Harry's situation exploded into focus when the formal legal letter arrived at 11:20 a.m. California time, delivered by a process server to the Montecito property. Expecting routine paperwork, Harry opened the envelope and instead found a document that would change everything. Written in precise legal language, it laid out the findings in brutal detail. 18 months of systematic surveillance, planning documents, evidence showing intent to target George, Charlotte, and Louis, infrastructure built for long-term exploitation. The letter also detailed the legal actions launched across multiple jurisdictions just hours earlier. According to someone who spoke to Harry later, his first reaction was disbelief. But disbelief cracked as he reviewed exhibits pulled directly from the flash drive. Meghan's own communications, strategy documents, recognition set in. He had seen her cultivate media ties before, but never imagined that same strategy aimed at his nieces and nephews. The letter gave Harry 72 hours to respond. Option 1. Acknowledge Meghan's conduct was unacceptable, confirm he had no knowledge, and cooperate fully. Option 2. Provide evidence he knew and tried to stop it, effectively becoming a witness against his wife, a path few believed possible. Option 3. Defend Meghan or remain silent, triggering permanent family separation, recovery of royal benefits, and potential criminal investigation if evidence surfaced. The letter made one thing unmistakably clear from the start. William was not looking for conversation, mediation, or any kind of family dialogue. This was a legal ultimatum, sharp and precise, with defined options and non-negotiable timelines. Harry's response would be formally documented, preserved for legal proceedings, and would permanently determine his relationship with the family he came from. There would be no walking it back later, no soft landing, no chance to reinterpret the stakes. Every word, every clause, every detail was deliberately crafted to leave no room for ambiguity. There was no fourth option, no neutral ground, no way to stay uninvolved. When Harry's position was examined coldly and without emotion, option 1 was nearly impossible. Acknowledging Meghan's conduct and separating from her would mean ending the marriage outright or creating a rupture so deep it could never be repaired. There was no soft version of that choice, no half measure, no compromise that could save appearances while preserving relationships. The weight of history, duty, and consequence bore down on him in that instant, and he could feel it in every decision he would have to make. Meghan would see it as betrayal. Divorce would be almost guaranteed, and Harry's relationship with his own children would likely become tangled in legal battles and long-term hostility. Option 3 was just as brutal. Refuse to condemn Meghan or stay silent, and he would lose all connection to his British family forever. No appeals, no second chances, no private reconciliation, no possibility of walking away without a permanent scar on every family tie. His children would grow up without relationships with their cousins, their grandfather, their uncle, or their aunt. Harry himself would become fully estranged, not because of shared family conflict, but through a documented decision to stand by someone who had targeted children for exploitation. Option 2, becoming a witness, technically existed, but in reality it was nearly impossible unless Harry had known far more about Meghan's actions than anyone believed. And even if he did have documentation, testifying against his wife would still destroy the marriage while offering zero guarantees of reconciliation with his family. William's letter promised nothing for cooperation. It only spelled out the cost of refusal. The 72-hour deadline was no accident. It was tight by design, intentionally engineered to push him to a real, unavoidable decision that could not be postponed or negotiated. Harry could not stall. He could not negotiate. He could not coordinate a counter-strategy with Meghan's legal team. He had to decide fast, based only on what was in front of him. The pressure was deliberate, meant to force a real choice, not a polished public maneuver, not an attempt to control perception, not a chance to maneuver emotionally. The ultimatum left no middle ground. no option to delay, and no room for error. Meghan's reaction when Harry showed her the letter was explosive and defensive. She claimed the flash drive was stolen property. She suggested the contents were fabricated or manipulated. She framed William's legal action as a personal vendetta by someone who had never accepted her as family. The tone was aggressive and unyielding, almost theatrical in its intensity. But underneath it lay a tangible fear of what the legal consequences could mean for her public image, and the fragile control she thought she maintained. She insisted that any information gathering had been defensive, meant to protect herself and Harry from palace manipulation and media attacks allegedly coordinated by William's camp. But that explanation collapsed under one unavoidable problem. The flash drive contained Meghan's own words, her own messages, laying out strategies for targeting William's children. Those documents expressed intentions that could not be spun as defensive or protective. Harry now faced a crisis far deeper than legal exposure or family fallout. He had to confront the possibility that he had married someone capable of treating children, including his own nieces and nephews, as intelligence targets in a long-term personal and commercial plan. He had to decide whether loyalty to that marriage was worth losing every other family connection permanently, along with legal consequences that could shadow him for years. By the morning of December 6th, 48 hours into the 72-hour window, Harry reportedly contacted his own lawyer, separate from any attorney representing him jointly with Meghan. That move alone spoke volumes. It suggested he was at least considering option one. Still, whether he would submit a written response meeting William's exact requirements remained unclear. What was clear was this: Harry's position had become completely untenable. He could not exist in both worlds anymore. He could not stay connected to Windsor while remaining married to someone who had declared operational war on its next generation. William's ultimatum forced a choice, and the clock was ticking. When it expired, Harry would either have submitted an acceptable response or, through action or silence, accepted permanent estrangement from everyone except the wife, whose strategy created this nightmare. The tragedy for those who remembered the brothers' closeness before marriages, institutions, and distance tore them apart was undeniable. It had come to legal ultimatums, documented betrayals, and forced decisions with no clean escape. But the deeper tragedy was even clearer. Harry could choose family, or he could choose Meghan. What he could no longer choose was the illusion that he could keep both. That time would fix everything. That love and blood would override strategy and intent. That illusion died the moment William opened an anonymous envelope and saw exactly what his brother's wife had been planning for his children. If you found this breakdown eye-opening and want the full behind-the-scenes story, hit like, subscribe for more, share this video with friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next video.